I'm going to demonstrate how our pioneers of this country made soap. They went to the market or to the meat shop and they bought animal fat, which they chopped up and heated and made it melt. And this is the first step of making soap from scratch. Okay. I've chopped up, this is beef fat, I've chopped it up into smaller pieces so it'll melt faster. Now as you can see, there's some pieces that still have meat in them. I'm going to throw them all into the pot. I've taken out some of the bigger pieces of meat. I'm going to throw all this into the pot to melt, and once it's melted I'll take out the actual pieces of meat. That'll be strained out. I'm going to add a little bit of water. As you can see, it's smoking. The water will boil off eventually, and if it isn't all boiled off, once the fat is separated from the meat, I strain it out and I pour it into a plastic container. Now our forefathers didn't have plastic, but pour it into something, into a dish, and freeze it. And then I can separate the water from the fat. Okay. I have cooked this, melted quite a bit of the fat off of the meat and the fat chunks, and I'm going to pour the liquid into a bowl. And strain the fat from what's left, the chunks of the membrane and the pieces of meat. Okay. This is melted fat. What I'm going to do is put this in the freezer and freeze it, so that if there is any water or any drippings from the meat, any gravy, that will separate. The fat rises to the top, and we can remove any sediments, just cut it off when it's frozen. This is what the soap looks like after it's been, or not the soap, but the fat looks like after it's been frozen. You can see on this one, the top part is nice and white. That's pure tallow, which is just soap. There's a little bit of brown speckling, and I'm going to cut that off on this one. And the same, it's a bit worse on this one. Here you see the gel from the meat actually on it, and that is going to be cut off as well. We don't want that in the soap, or the soap won't turn out. It has to be the pure fat, which is called tallow. We're going to shave this off until we get to a point where there's no discoloration. As you can see now, we're down to the pure tallow. And this is what we're going to melt and add the lye to, which will turn into soap. The tallow has to be weighed out exactly. It's very important that the measurements are exact. I weigh out the tallow and then I'm going to weigh out the lye. Okay. I have measured out the lye and the water. I'll show you what the lye looks like. It's a white crystal. I add it to the water and stir. Now this gets very hot. The water gets very hot when you combine them, and the fumes are very toxic, so this should be done outside. We'll take it outside to cool. It has to be the same temperature as the fat that's melting on the stove. It has to be about 120 degrees. Both of them have to be that temperature before you combine them. Good. I have reached the right temperature for the tallow and the lye at about 120 degrees. Now I'm combining them, slowly pouring it in and stirring. As I stir, the mixture will gradually become thicker, and when it becomes like a kind of a liquid honey, then I'll pour it into the molds. It takes a little while of stirring before that happens though. Okay. The soap has reached the tracing stage, which is like a pudding or a runny honey. This is when we pour it into the molds. Now I have a wooden box here with a wet piece of cloth in it. That's how the pioneers used to do it. They didn't have plastics, and you can't put soap into a metal mold because of the reaction on the metal. So we pour it into this mold. Make sure it fits into the corners. Then we're going to wrap it up and put it in the closet for 24 to 48 hours. It just needs to sit in a warm, dark place, not overly warm, but just room temperature, and then we'll unmold it later. During this process, it saponifies, which means it hardens into a soap. Right now it's still runny and a bit runny, just kind of like a pudding. Okay, I'm going to unwrap this. It's sat in the molds for about 36 to 40 hours, and it should be saponified, which means it will have hardened. This is the soap that was in the wooden box, just like they used to do in the pioneer days. The cloth helps me to pull it out, and I can flip it over, peel the cloth off. Voila, we have a big chunk of soap. Nice and hard, a nice color, there's no speckles in it. I'm going to slice it up into small bars, which I will give you some later that you can take home. It's a very good consistency. It's nice and firm. The color is really good. The soap needs to cure for a few weeks before we actually use it. So that's where we're at now.